we had discussed about polyatomic ions, right? These polyatomic ions, right? And the thing is, we did formulas, right? That was, I think, the last thing that we were doing, formulas, and we had started to talk about acids and bases, right? So we had started talking about them, and I told you that acids are any molecules that they produce H plus ions, right? And if there's a molecule that gains H plus ion, that's a base. And we also talked about the importance of these H plus one and OH ions. I told you that water is important; it's everywhere. Most of the reactions that are happening in water. So the composition of water really matters. Like if there are two molecules like X and there's Y, and they are trying to react with each other, right? So the environment that's around them that matters. Water molecule breaks down and produces H plus one and OH ions. If you add an acid, the quantity of H plus ions would be greater. If you add a base, the quantity of OH ions would become greater. So every reaction has a particular preference of what type of water it's supposed to have. Uh, so we discussed acids that they were proton donors, and I told you acids are everywhere. You have a lot of molecules that are producing H plus ions. So you have citric acid, malic acids, amino acids, vinegar, acetic. They're corrosive if they are highly concentrated, then they're corrosive. And we started making these formulas of acids, which I gave you as an assignment as well. So I told you that every acid is, since it produces H plus ions, therefore it's supposed to have these H plus ions. An acid is something that has H plus ions, and those any positive ion that would not exist alone. There's supposed to be a negative ion attached to it. So the formula of acids is very simple, that you take any H plus ion and attach it with any negative ion. That would result in the formation of an acid. So let me write down the names of all the acids. I'll write the names. Just wait 1 minute. There's a zan going on. Here's a list of acids. I think most of you gave me a list of acids that you have. We were supposed to make these formulas. So an acid is any molecule that is capable of producing H plus ion. So for example, I have a container and that container has water in it, right? So it has a bunch of H2O molecules, and so lots and lots of water molecules. And some of the water molecules would break down, decompose, ionize, and they would produce. They're going to break down and they're going to produce H plus 1 and OH ions. Now, if there is only water, that the quantity of H plus 1 ions and the quantity of OH ions would be the same. If there's one H plus 1 ion being produced, there's going to be one OH ion being produced as well, if a water molecule breaks down. But if you add an acid, let's say I added HCl. Now, HCl is made up of H plus 1 and Cl minus 1. So if I add HCl, HCl is going to split up and it's going to produce H plus 1 ions and Cl minus 1 ions. Now what you can clearly see is that in your solution, in your solution of water, now you have two H plus 1 ions and there's only one OH ion. If I add more HCl, that HCl molecule is going to split up and it would release more H plus 1 ions. So that is what an acid does. If you add an acid to a solution, the quantity of H plus 1 ions, it would start going up. And the quantity of OH ions would remain the same. Is this part clear?
यस सर। सर आप हल्का सा एक मिनट के ऊपर करेंगे स्क्रीन।
ठीक है, ये ले लो ना, ये बोर्ड का लिंक ले लो ना, जस्ट अ सेकेंड।
ओके सर।
I think I did give you copy board. Just a second. ठीक है, sending it in chat ये यहाँ पे. So you have to memorize these acids. These are not the only acids. Remember, I told you that anything that's capable of producing H plus ions is an acid. So there are millions of different molecules that are capable of doing that. But these are the ones that you have to remember and you have to memorize. But you have to remember the concept as well, that it could be any molecule that's capable of producing H positive ions. As anyways, that's the concept of what an acid would do. That it would increase the concentration of H plus ions. Just a second, let me. Now, let's move towards bases now. So what's a base? Base did the opposite. It accepted H positive ions, right? That was what a base was. It accepted H positive ions. It removed H positive ions from the solution. Like if there's a water solution and I started adding a base to it, then all of these H plus ions would be gone, and the quantity of OH ions would increase. So that is what a base does. It removes H plus ions and simultaneously it increases OH ions. So which compounds are bases? You've got three compounds. I mean, in nature there are millions of different molecules that are basic, but you've got three compounds that are basic, basically, that you have to study in O levels. One of them is OH minus one. Like whenever anything has a OH minus one, the OH minus one is going to attract the H plus one ions, and it's going to form water. So a water molecule would be, it's going to be formed, and in that way, the H plus one would be absorbed by the base. Similarly, there's another ion which is O minus 2. And this ion is also capable of accepting H plus 1 ions. It's capable of accepting two H plus 1 ions. And this one would also form water. And then there's another ion which is basic. That's a carbonate ion. This carbonate ion is weakly basic. Like it's not a very strong base, but it's weakly basic. What that would do is it's going to do the same thing. It would also accept H plus ions from the solution. It's also going to accept H plus ions from the solution. Why? Because uh, there's an O minus 2 over here, there's an oxygen over here. I mean, there are three oxygens, but one of the oxygen is going to attract the H plus 1 ions, and it's going to form H2O, leaving behind carbon dioxide. So you've got these three ions, and these three ions are basic. There's your OH ion, there's your O minus 2 ion, and then there's your carbonate ion. All three ions are basic. The first two are highly basic. The third one, it attracts H plus 1, but not that strongly. Is this point clear?
सर ये वीकली बेसिक है सॉरी
Huh.
यस सर
ठीक है. Is this clear? Hamza, is this clear? Saneem, is this clear?
Yes, sir.
यस सर
Yes, sir.
Anyway, so basically, this is what's going to happen if you add a base to water. The water molecule, there would be lots of water molecules. The water would split up into H plus 1 and OH ions. Normally, it's neutral. They would be in equal quantity. So these ions are swimming in water. So if I add a base to it, let's say I add O minus 2 ions to it. What the O minus 2 ions would do is they would immediately attract the H plus 1, and they would end up forming water. So these ions would be gone, and it would turn into water molecules. So you can clearly see that now you have three OH ions, but there's only one H plus 1 ion. So the quantity of H plus 1 ions in the solution has decreased, and the quantity of OH ions in the solution has gone up, right? So that is what the purpose of the base is, that it would make the solution basic. It's going to increase the OH ions, it's going to decrease the H plus 1 ions. ठीक है, Afan, is this clear? Turhan, is this clear?
यस सर
So now the thing is about these three ions, specifically these three ions. A negative ion does not exist alone. There's always going to be a positive ion next to it. So it's not just going to be an OH ion. It has to be this. There has to be some positive ion. So who makes positive ion? Metals. So you either have a metal hydroxide. I mean, the OH ion is not going to exist alone. There always has to be a positive metal ion next to it. I mean, that's how chemical compounds are formed. A negative ion is always attracted to a positive ion. There could be a metal oxide. These are basic as well. So you have O minus 2 attached to a metal. Or there's another positive ion, which is ammonium. Ammonium is an ion that was given in the list above. It's NH4 with a charge of +1. So the OH minus 1 could be attached to it as well. So basically, generally, it's any compound that has OH minus 1, O minus 2, or CO3 minus 2. These three would not exist alone. There has to be a positive ion that would be attached to them. Carbonates, it's either going to be a metal carbonate, so it's going to be any positive ion with a carbonate ion, or it could be an ammonium carbonate as well. That would also be. So it's going to be NH4 plus 1 attached to a CO3 minus 2 ion, right? So you have these, I mean, any compound that has any of these three ions. That's what a base is. So it could be NaOH. It could be Mg with OH ions, Mg2 plus, OH minus 1. So it's going to be MgOH2. It could be calcium carbonate. That would be weakly basic as well. So all these compounds are weakly. I mean, this one is weakly basic. This is basic. So is this clear? Which compounds are basic?
सर CaCO3 वीकली बेसिक है
Any compound that has OH ions or O minus 2 ions or CO3 minus 2 ions.
ओके
So I can write it over here. It's going to be, I mean, these compounds are going to be attached to a positive metal ion. or the other positive ion that we studied is an ammonium ion. So you can make a combination of compounds. They would all be basic. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the first reaction. The first reaction that we're going to do is Acha, Hamza, it's the thing is it depends on how strongly the ion attracts H plus one ions. Okay, so the attraction like two magnets, right? Two magnets attracting each other. If you know like if you have a strong I mean the magnets could be strong, they could be weak. The force of attraction could be strong, the force of attraction could be weak. So it depends, it varies from ion to ion. Like O minus 2 might be very basic, it would attract the H plus 1 very strongly. And CO3 minus 2, its attraction for H plus 1 might be weaker. I mean, there could be a number of factors why it's weaker. But the basic idea is that every ion has a different attraction. Hamza, is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Well, ionic compounds, we did talk about this thing. Yes, Saneem. But any of these three ions, or you can say that any of these three ions, if they're present in any of the compounds, any compound whatsoever, just remember the negative ion is not going to exist alone. There's going to be a positive, something positive attached to it. So if anything that has OH minus 1 or O minus 2 or CO3 minus 2, specifically the ion, the thing would be basic. And not NH3, it's going to be NH4 plus 1. Saneem, is this clear?
Yes.
So we're going to start with the first reaction. Remember, I'm only interested in reactions at the moment. So we're going to construct our first equation, reaction number 1. And most of the reactions that you will study would be revolving around acids and bases. So the first reaction is, it's a metal reacting with an acid, and it would produce a salt plus hydrogen gas would be given off. That's a first reaction. So let's pick any metal. Let's pick calcium, group 2. That's a metal. And let's pick any acid. HCl is one example. What's going to happen? Pick any metal, pick any acid. Write them down. Every time H2 gas is going to be produced. And it's always going to be H2 gas. Don't turn it into H3 or H4 or anything. H2 gas, the specific formula of H2 gas, I mean that it always has to be H2. Don't turn it into H1 or H3 or H4. It has to be H2.
Okay, sir.
So now, how do you form a salt? Salt is formed when an acid gets neutralized. So whenever you neutralize an acid, that's when a salt is going to be, it's going to be formed. What does that mean? So you have HCl, right? Can anyone quickly point out to me, why do you call it an acid? Do you call it because it has H plus 1, or do you call it because it has Cl minus 1? Like why?
सर H plus 1 इसकी वजह से.
ठीक है, you call it an acid because it has H plus 1 ions. You call it an acid because it's capable of releasing an H plus 1 ion, right? That's what an acid is. Anything that's capable of producing H plus 1 ions. So what does neutralization mean? Neutralization means that you remove the H plus 1 ion. If you get rid of the H plus 1 ion, it's no longer going to behave as an acid. But you would have to replace it with some other thing, right? Which in this case would be calcium. That is what calcium would do. Calcium would come in, the metal would come in, and it would neutralize the acid. It's going to knock out the H would go and form H2 gas, and calcium would take the place of H. Calcium is going to knock it out and displace it. So that is how the acid is neutralized, because this thing now is not capable of acting as an acid because it no longer has an H plus 1 ion. Is this clear?
सर कैल्शियम इसलिए H को डिस्प्लेस कर देता है क्योंकि वो हायर इन रिएक्टिविटी सीरीज में.
हाँ वो भी है लेकिन exactly वही है ठीक है.
Okay, sir.
But details later ठीक है. I'm just saying that calcium would come in and it would. Right now we're just interested in the equation ठीक है, not the detailed story.
Okay, sir.
So whenever you neutralize an acid, a salt is formed. Calcium is going to come in and it would knock out the H. The H would go into form H2 gas and calcium would take its place. Every time you're going to do this. That's how salts are formed. Salts are neutral compounds. Now, this compound is not capable of producing H plus ions because, I mean, originally it did have H plus ions, but now that's gone. So that's a neutral salt that is formed. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Turhan, is this clear? Saneem?
Yes.
So now there's one problem with this, and that is that whenever you make a formula, make sure you do crisscross again. Calcium is in group 2, it has a charge of +2. Cl is in group 7, it has a charge of -1. What would be the formula of the salt that's going to be produced?
CaCl2.
CaCl2.
Okay, it's going to be CaCl2. So I'm not focusing on the balance equation at the moment. Forget balancing at the moment. So the equation is calcium is reacting with HCl and it ends up forming CaCl2 plus H2. Okay, so we're not focusing on a balanced equation, just focusing on the formula. That's your first equation. Similarly, we can do another reaction. Balkit, let's try and do calcium's reactions with all acids. Let's do it with nitric acid. Now, how did I tell you the salt is going to be formed? That the calcium is going to come in and it's going to knock out the H. H2 gas is always formed and calcium is going to displace the H. Calcium is going to occupy its position. So it's going to be Ca and NO3. Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
And whenever you form a salt, make sure you do the crisscross. The charge on NO3 is -1 and the charge on calcium is +2. So what is the formula?
CaNO3, Ca bracket में NO3 and 2.
And 2, right? So that is what your salt is. Let's do another one. Calcium with sulfuric acid. That's H2SO4. Same thing. The H's are going to get knocked out. H2 gas is formed. And calcium is going to displace all the H and would occupy their position. So calcium is +2 and SO4 is -2. You don't have to do crisscross because the charges are already balanced. Like even if you do crisscross, if you simplify, it's still going to be 1 calcium, 1 sulfate. And lastly, we can do calcium with phosphoric acid. Same thing would happen. The H is going to get knocked out, so calcium would take its place. And H2 gas is going to be formed. Calcium is in group 2, it has a charge of +2, PO4 is -3. So what's the formula of the salt?
Ca3 and bracket में PO4 and then 2.
And PO4 is going to be twice, right? So that's what is happening here. So you have these 4 acids. I mean, I did examples of these 4 acids. Can you repeat the whole thing now with the aluminium? Remember, aluminium is in group 3. And I mean, repeat every reaction with aluminium. Aluminium with HCl, aluminium with HNO3, aluminium with H2SO4, and aluminium with H3PO4. And also try and do this for potassium. Potassium is in group 1. So make the equations and make the formulas. So 4 equations for this, 4 with these. Repeat everything, replace this with potassium now. Send me, you've got 10 minutes for this. TK, send me the 8 equations. TK, start working on this. And I've sent you the board link if you want to know the formula of the acids or the ions, the charges on the ions, they're all given away here somewhere, right at the top. So they're all provided over there. So where's the questions? So everyone try and do this, because I'm waiting for the answers on WhatsApp. Keep connected over here. Leave only once your work is checked.
Sir, so K with all of these and AL with all of these.
हाँ मतलब replace calcium and Al with HCl, Al with HNO3, Al with H2SO4, and remember Al is group 3, so it has a charge of +3.
Okay.
Sir, do we need to balance the equations as well?
And you forget balancing at the moment. I mean, we're going to come back to balancing. We haven't done balancing. Just write the formulas.